single mother collapsed in the street. Mafia boss held her as she whispered, "Please have mercy." The city was choking on a dusk that smelled like old exhaust and wet wool. For Aria Moretti, the cold was a personal enemy, a thing with teeth that gnawed through the thin soles of her boots and settled deep in her bones. She was in her late 20s, but the kind of exhaustion she carried aged a woman faster than time. It lived in the hollows under her eyes and the permanent ache in her lower back, a souvenir from working 2 jobs that were barely keeping her afloat. By day, she was a waitress, her hair pulled back tight, smiling for tips while her feet screamed. By night, she cleaned office buildings, the scent of bleach and stale coffee clinging to her long after she clocked out. Both were just means to an end, and the end was Noah. Noah was 6 years old, small for his age, with eyes too big for his face and a cough that rattled his small frame. He was sick, the kind of sick that required constant vigilance and medicine that cost more than her daily wages. He was the only good thing left. She was walking, or perhaps just shuffling, toward the dim light of her apartment building, a single, agonizing thought playing on repeat. What now? The pharmacy lights had been too bright, buzzing with an indifferent hum as the pharmacist, a woman with tired eyes and a set of keys clipped to her belt, slid the small paper bag back across the counter. "I'm sorry," the woman had said, not sounding sorry at all. "The card is expired. Medicaid declined it." Aria had stared at the prescription. "Insulin, life." "Please," Aria whispered, the words scraping her dry throat. "It's just the beginning of the month. It must be a mistake. I can't just... The pharmacist cut her off, turning to the next person in line. "Next." Aria had taken the useless prescription, the small vial of medicine she could not afford sitting on the counter like a mockery. She had walked out into the freezing evening air, the paper in her hand. She had failed. Now, the streetlights are blurred. The stress of the last 48 hours, the double shifts, the lack of food, it all converged. She hadn't eaten since a piece of toast yesterday morning. The hunger was a hollow, dizzying void. She stumbled, her ankle turning on a crack in the icy pavement. She pitched forward, not into the dirty snowbank, but into the alley, a narrow canyon between 2 brick buildings that offered no shelter, only shadows. She tried to catch herself, but her limbs felt like water. She crumpled, her knee striking the concrete with a sharp, distant pain. The prescription paper fluttered from her grasp. Noah. He was with the neighbor, asleep, trusting her. She had to get up. She tried to push herself onto her hands and knees, but the world tilted. The brick wall spun. "Please," she breathed, the word a small cloud of fog in the air. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was talking to the city, to God, to the crushing weight of a life she couldn't manage. "Please have mercy." A car door slammed, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet street. Dante Varelli did not take this route home. His driver knew better. But the meeting had run late, a tedious affair with union bosses who thought they could skim from his port operations. And he had been restless, annoyed. He'd told the driver to take the side streets, needing silence. He saw her before the driver did, a heap of old coats and dark hair against the brickwork. It was not unusual. The city was full of broken things. But then he saw the small, bundled shape beside her, a child stirring, letting out a weak cry. "Stop," Dante commanded. The driver stopped the sedan, the engine purring. "Sir, it's not a good area." Dante was already out of the car. The cold hit the fine wool of his overcoat, but he didn't feel it. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace. He was a man accustomed to violence, not charity. Charity was a transaction, a way to buy loyalty or silence. He crouched. The woman was conscious, barely. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a pale, hazy green, unfocused and terrified. She was clutching a piece of paper. Then he heard her whisper again. The sound cracked and raw. "Please have mercy." The words struck him. Not a plea for money, not a demand. It was a surrender. It was the sound of a string snapping. Something shifted in his chest, an unfamiliar irritation. He was used to people fearing him, hating him, or needing things from him. He was not used to this raw, unfiltered despair. Without a word, he slid one arm under her back and the other beneath her knees. She was frighteningly light. He lifted her, the scent of cold air and cheap soap filling his senses. The child, a small boy, watched him with wide, fever-bright eyes. "Get the boy," Dante said to his driver, who scrambled to obey. He laid her in the back of the heated car, her head lolling against the Italian leather. He didn't know her identity. He didn't care. But the sound of her plea echoed in his head, haunting him. He made a call, his voice low and flat. "Alessi, I'm coming to you. 2 patients, a woman and a child, malnutrition, exposure. Have the clinic ready." He hung up. The woman was breathing, a shallow, rattling sound. He looked at her, at the grime on her knuckles and the exhaustion etched into her face. He was used to Charity being transactional, but something in her eyes, that brief, unguarded look, had stirred him. It annoyed him. This prick of feeling. It was a loose thread in a carefully woven life. When Aria woke, the first thing she registered was the silence. Not the street silence, which was never truly quiet, but a deep, muffled quiet that felt heavy. The second was the warmth. It was under her. A mattress so soft it felt like sinking into a cloud, and over her, a blanket that weighed almost nothing but radiated heat. The third was the smell, not bleach, not grease, something clean like lemons and old, polished wood. Her eyes snapped open. The room was vast, the ceiling 2 stories high, crisscrossed with dark wooden beams, a fireplace, unlit, dominated one wall. The walls were a soft cream, the furniture dark and heavy. She was in a bed that could have fit her entire kitchen. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. "Noah!" She threw the blankets off. She was wearing a simple, soft cotton gown, not her clothes. She tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness slammed into her, and she gripped the bedpost, her knuckles white. "He is safe!" The voice came from the shadows near the fireplace. A man stepped forward. He was tall, broader than she'd expected. He wore a dark sweater and trousers, simple clothes that somehow looked more expensive than any suit she'd ever seen. His face was stark, defined by sharp angles and dark, unreadable eyes. He wasn't moving toward her. He kept his distance, his hands resting lightly in his pockets. "Where is my son?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "He's in the next room, sleeping. My physician has seen him." "Your physician?" Aria leaned against the post, trying to clear her head. The alley, the cold, the car. This man. "Who are you? What do you want?" Dante watched her. The panic was real. The fear was real. But underneath it, she was vibrating with a fierce, protective energy. "My name is Dante. You collapsed. I brought you here." "Brought me where?" "A hospital." "This is not a hospital. This is my home." Her eyes narrowed. Men like him, men with homes like this and calm voices, were the most dangerous men of all. "I want to leave. Now, take me to my son." "You are in no condition to leave," he said, his voice flat. "And the boy's fever is high. Dr. Alessi gave him medicine. He needs to rest, as do you." "I don't want your help," she spat, though the words lacked force. "I am aware," Dante said. He inclined his head slightly. "But you have it. There are no strings. Miss Moretti, you needed help. I provided it. When you are both well, you are free to go." He knew her name. Of course he did. He had probably gone through her wallet, the empty wallet. Aria's legs gave out, and she sank back onto the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. This was a trap. It had to be. But he just stood there, a statue of quiet power, offering help without demanding payment. It was the most terrifying thing she had ever encountered. The next 24 hours were a blur of disorientation. Aria was wary, every muscle tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was prideful, refusing the richer foods a housekeeper brought, accepting only broth and bread. But she was also grateful. Dr. Alessi, a quiet man with silver hair, had checked on Noah 3 times. The medicine was working. The fever had broken. Dante, for his part, was coldly intriguing. He was absent for most of the day, but she felt his presence in the house, in the way the staff moved, in the heavy silence. He never approached her, never asked personal questions. He simply existed, a shadow in his own home. It was Noah who broke the tension. On the second morning, Arya woke to find Noah's bed in her room empty. A jolt of panic shot through her until she heard it, a deep, rumbling woof, followed by a high-pitched giggle. She followed the sound down the wide, carpeted hallway, her bare feet silent on the plush runner. She found him in a vast kitchen, sitting on the heated limestone floor. A massive dog, a cane corso the color of shadows, was lying on its side. Noah was rubbing its belly, laughing as the dog's tail thumped against the cabinets. "His name is Bruno," a woman in a gray uniform said, smiling. She was older, her face kind. "He doesn't usually like strangers." Noah looked up. His face flushed with happiness, not fever. "His head is bigger than mine. Mama," an older housekeeper, the same one who had brought her broth, set a cup of hot chocolate in front of Noah. He drank it greedily. Arya stood in the doorway, her armor cracking. This place was a fortress of impossible wealth, run by a man who likely had blood on his hands. But her son was safe. He was warm, fed, and laughing with a giant dog. The rigid formality of the mansion seemed to soften around the small boy, the staff smiling at his innocent commands to Bruno. That night, she couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Noah was breathing easily in the bed beside hers, the first peaceful sleep he'd had in weeks. Restless, Arya pulled on the silk robe that had been left for her and padded through the dark room. She found a set of glass doors and stepped out onto a wide stone balcony. The city glittered below, a cold, beautiful lie. He was already there, at the far end, leaning against the balustrade. Dante. A small, red ember glowed in the dark as he smoked a cigarette. She should have retreated. She should have gone back to the safety of the room, but she didn't. She walked toward him, wrapping the robe tighter around herself. He didn't turn, but he spoke, his voice a low gravel in the night air. "You should be resting." "I can't," she said, stopping a few feet away. The wind was sharp, but the stone under her feet was strangely warm. "I don't know how to be in this place." He finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, capturing the distant city lights. "Because it is not yours. Because I don't understand it. I don't understand you." She took a breath, the cold air stinging. "Why?" I asked myself the same question. He took a long drag from the cigarette and exhaled, the smoke vanishing instantly on the wind. "You asked for mercy. It was inconvenient to refuse." It was an evasion, but it felt true. She found herself talking, the words spilling out, about the pharmacy, the expired card, the endless, grinding cycle of being one step behind. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just testifying. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just listened, his stillness a strange comfort. When she finished, a shiver racked her body, one that had nothing to do with the wind. He moved then, so quickly she didn't have time to react. He didn't put his coat on her, a gesture she would have recognized and rebuffed. He simply stepped closer, his body blocking the wind. He was a wall of warmth. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his skin and the sharp tang of tobacco. "You are resilient," he stated. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. "I'm tired," she whispered, looking down. She turned to go. The intimacy of the moment too much, too confusing. As she passed him, her hand brushed his. His skin was hot, his hand large and rough-knuckled. It was an accident, a brief, static shock. She stopped. He looked down at her, his gaze lingering, intense. It wasn't a look of pity, or even of kindness. It was darker, more complex. He was seeing her, not as a victim, not as a charity case, but as a woman. And she, in turn, saw the man beneath the cold exterior, a flicker of something lonely and contained. It terrified her. "Wait." He stopped her before she reached the door. He reached into his pocket and pressed something cool and plastic into her palm, a key card. Then he pressed a thick roll of bills on top of it. "For the morning," he said. "A hotel, medicine, whatever you need." Arya's hand closed around the offering. Her pride screamed at her to throw it back in his face. "I can't pay you back." "It is not alone." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, dismissing her. "There are no obligations. Go to sleep, Arya." She fled. Later that night, hours later, she was jolted awake, a noise in the hall. She sat up, her heart pounding. The room was dark, save for the sliver of light from the hallway, which was usually kept dark. She crept to the door and peered through the crack. The hallway light was on. She saw him, Dante. He was standing outside her door, looking not at her, but at Noah. She held her breath. He pushed the door open, just a fraction, and stepped inside the room. He moved silently. He stood over Noah's bed, a large, dark shape in the dimness. Arya's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. But he didn't touch the boy. He only watched him breathe for a long moment. Then, with a gesture so gentle it seemed impossible, he reached down and pulled the heavy blanket up, tucking it carefully under Noah's chin. He backed out of the room, pulling the door almost closed. He walked down the hall and pressed a switch. The light clicked off, plunging the corridor back into darkness. Arya leaned her forehead against the cool wood of the door, her legs weak. In her hand, she clutched the key card and the money. He had given her a way out, but as she watched him disappear into the shadows of his own home, she felt an unsettling, terrifying thought. She wasn't sure she wanted to take it. The money in her coat pocket felt like a heavy, hot stone. Arya clutched Noah's hand as one of Dante's silent drivers, a man whose suit probably cost more than her last apartment's security deposit, drove them away from the imposing estate. The gates closed behind them with a smooth, expensive thud that echoed the closing of a very strange, warm chapter. She directed the driver to her neighborhood, the buildings growing progressively grimier, the snow on the sidewalks turning to a uniform gray sludge. She felt the driver's eyes on her in the rearview mirror, his judgment a palpable thing. She got out 3 blocks away, unable to bear pulling up to her own front door in a car that looked like it belonged to a head of state. "Thank you," she mumbled, pulling Noah close. The man just nodded, his expression unreadable, and the black sedan slid silently away, leaving her in the world she belonged to. The hallway of her building smelled like stale beer and cat urine. It was a familiar, depressing smell, but today it felt like a personal affront. She climbed the 3 flights, her legs aching, Noah whimpering that he was tired. She reached her door, apartment 3B, and stopped. A thick neon orange paper was taped to the wood. Final notice of eviction. Her breath hitched. She knew she was behind, but she thought she had another week. She reached for her key, her hand shaking, and that's when she saw the rest of it. The lock was busted, the wood around it splintered. Someone had kicked it in. And below the eviction notice, in sloppy, black spray paint, were 2 words: whore, pay up, a cold, sharp fear. Worse than the hunger in the alley. Shot through her. This was Marco. This was her ex-husband's ghost, a debt collector from a life she thought she had escaped. She pushed the door open, her heart hammering. The small apartment was destroyed. The sofa cushions were slashed. A small, cheap television was shattered on the floor, and the few groceries she had left were scattered, mixed with dirt and broken glass. They had been thorough. They had been sending a message. Noah started to cry, a high, terrified sound. "Mama, it's broken!" Arya grabbed him, backing out of the apartment, her mind racing. She couldn't stay here. She wouldn't. She ran down the stairs, out into the biting wind, and started walking. She went to the only other place she could think of. The St. Jude's Women's Shelter was on the other side of town, a concrete building with barred windows. The waiting room was packed, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and despair. Arya waited for an hour, Noah asleep on her lap, before a tired-looking woman called her name. "I'm sorry, honey," the woman said, not looking up from her clipboard. We've been full for a month. The cold snap. I can put you on the waiting list. Maybe next week?" "Next week?" Arya's voice cracked. "I have a child. My apartment, it's not safe. Everybody here has a child. Honey, everybody here isn't safe." The woman's eyes were sympathetic but firm. "It's the best I can do." Arya walked back out into the cold. The sun was setting. painting the dirty sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. She had nowhere to go. Her pride. The only thing she had left was a useless, flimsy shield against the reality of the street. She had a few $100s of Dante's money in her pocket. She hailed a cab, the yellow paint chipped and dirty. She gave him the address, the one she had memorized, the one in the hills overlooking the city. Swallowing her pride felt like swallowing broken glass. She stood at the massive wrought iron gate, holding Noah's hand. She pressed the intercom, her fingers numb. "Yes?" The voice was crisp, belonging to the housekeeper, Elena. "It's Aria Moretti. The gate buzzed and swung open. She walked up the long, heated driveway, each step a fresh wave of humiliation. He opened the front door himself, Dante. He was in the same dark trousers, a gray cashmere sweater replacing the black one. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look at anything at all. He just stood there, his dark eyes fixed on her, taking in her wind-chapped face, the terror still clinging to her, and the small, sleeping boy she held. She opened her mouth. A torrent of explanations, apologies, and promises ready to spill out. "I'll pay you back, just for one night." "My apartment." He held up a hand, a small, sharp gesture that cut her off. He said nothing to her. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply turned his head. "Elena," he called, his voice echoing in the marble foyer. "Prepare Mr. Noah's room. He will be staying." He stepped aside, holding the door open. Aria walked past him, the warmth of the house enveloping her. She hadn't realized she was shaking until she stopped. The next morning, Aria woke before dawn. She put on the simple clothes the staff had washed and laid out for her and went straight to the kitchen. Elena was there, starting the coffee. "Good morning, Miss Moretti. Can I get you?" "I'm not Miss Moretti," Aria said, her voice firm. "I'm Aria, and I'm here to work." Elena paused, the coffee scoop in her hand. "Mr. Varelli would not—" "I don't care what Mr. Varelli would or would not," Aria said, her pride reasserting itself, desperate for solid ground. "I am not a guest. I am not his charity case. I will not be a kept woman. I will earn our keep." She looked around the pristine kitchen. "What needs to be cleaned?" Elena studied her, a small, impressed smile touching her lips. "The floors, they are mopped every morning." "Show me where the mop is." For the next week, Aria became a ghost in the house, just like its owner. She scrubbed floors. She polished silver she was afraid to hold. She helped cook, prep vegetables. She folded laundry that was softer than any clothes she had ever owned. She refused to sit. She refused to be served. And Dante changed. His routine, which the staff seemed to revere, began to shift. He started taking his morning espresso in the kitchen, sitting at the massive granite island, reading a financial paper while she was on her hands and knees scrubbing the limestone. She could feel his eyes on her back. It wasn't leering, it was watchful, an intense, unnerving focus. He started appearing when she walked Noah to the front door, where a black car, not the same one as before, waited to take him to a new school, a private school. Dante had arranged it without a word to her. He would stand in the doorway, a silent, imposing guardian, and watch until the car was gone. One afternoon, he walked into the kitchen while she was helping Elena. He didn't speak to the housekeeper. He spoke to Aria. "Aria, walk with me." It wasn't a request. Elena's eyes widened. Aria wiped her hands on her apron and followed him. He led her out of the kitchen, through the formal dining room, and into a vast, 2-story library. The room smelled of old paper and leather. A chessboard was set up on a low table between 2 deep armchairs. Noah was already there, his small legs dangling from the chair, a look of intense concentration on his face. "He is bored," Dante said, as if this explained everything. "He needs a challenge." Aria watched, stunned, as Dante sat opposite her son. "The night," Dante said, his deep voice patient, "is tricky. It moves like an L. 2 steps forward, 1 step over. It is the only piece that can jump over the others." Noah, completely unafraid of this formidable man, pointed a small finger, like a kangaroo. Dante's expression didn't change, but a small muscle in his jaw twitched. No, not like a kangaroo. Arya stood in the shadows of the doorway, watching them play. Dante was a patient teacher, never condescending, treating Noah's moves with a grave seriousness. After 20 minutes, Noah, in a stroke of beginner's luck, managed to trap one of Dante's bishops. "Ha!" Noah shouted, pumping his fist. "I got your church guy!" Arya held her breath. Dante stared at the board for a long, silent moment. Then a sound rumbled up from his chest. It was not a smile. It was a laugh. It was a deep, rusty, genuine sound that filled the quiet library and seemed to shock the dust from the air. Arya's hand went to her throat. The sound changed him. It stripped away the cold, hard layers and exposed. For a single second, the man underneath, it made him real. It made him human. And that, she realized with a jolt, was more dangerous than his silent indifference ever had been. She began to watch him differently. The tension in the house became a living thing, a low hum in the air. She would feel him watching her as she weeded the garden with the groundskeeper. He would be in his study, the door ajar, his eyes lifting from his paperwork as she passed. She avoided him, and yet she was profoundly, constantly aware of him. One night, the silence of the house was too much. She couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She heard a noise from the basement levels, a steady, rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack. She followed it, drawn by a curiosity that overrode her caution. She found the gym. It was a room larger than her entire apartment, filled with black, menacing equipment. The air smelled of sweat, leather, and something metallic. He was there, his back to her, working a heavy bag. He was shirtless. Arya stopped. His back was a roadmap of corded muscle, moving with a fluid, brutal grace. A few pale, thin scars crisscrossed the skin near his shoulder blades. He wore only a pair of gray sweatpants, slung low on his hips. He wasn't wrapping his hands. He was hitting the bag bare-knuckled. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He was punishing it, or punishing himself. He must have sensed her. He stopped, his fist resting against the bag, his chest heaving. He didn't turn around. "You should not be down here. Arya?" His voice was rough, breathless. "I couldn't sleep." He was still for a moment, his head bowed, then he turned. Slowly, his chest was slick with sweat, his dark hair damp. His eyes were not cold, they were hot, burning with an intensity she hadn't seen before. He was all coiled, primal energy, and she was suddenly terribly aware of her thin cotton pajamas. "This is not a safe place for you," he said. "Nowhere is," she whispered, the truth of it hanging in the air. She didn't leave. She stepped further into the room. "Why do you do that? Hit it until your hands bleed?" He looked down at his knuckles. They were red and raw. "Everyone has to bleed. Arya, better it's a bag than a person. Is that what you do? Decide who bleeds?" He walked to a bench and picked up a white towel, wiping his face. His eyes never left hers. "Sometimes, survival is not a pretty business." "Survival," she said, the word tasting bitter. "Is that what this is? Me, scrubbing your floors? You, hiding in this fortress?" "We are both trapped," he said, his voice quiet. "Just in different cages." The admission startled her. He was closer now, only a few feet away. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "What were you running from?" "Arya. In that alley. It was more than a pharmacy. More than hunger." And just like that, the dam of her fear and her secrets broke. "My ex-husband," she said, her voice shaking. "His name was Marco. He wasn't a good man. He liked to drink. He liked to hit." She instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. "He liked to hit me where it wouldn't show. He ran with a gang. He ran up debts, gambling, drugs, I don't know. I took Noah and I ran. I thought I was free, but they found me. They were the ones at my apartment. They were the ones who spray-painted my door." She looked up at him. The final, terrible piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "They're his, aren't they? The debts. They owe your organization money." Dante's face went perfectly, terrifyingly still. The heat in his eyes turned to ice. It was a blankness more violent than any rage. He didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. She choked on the word. "He said if I ever left, he would find me. He would take Noah." Dante just watched her, his jaw so tight it looked like it was carved from stone, and he didn't say a word. He walked past her, picked up a roll of white athletic tape, and began, with slow, deliberate movements, to wrap his raw knuckles. The scene shifted. Hours later, the music in the Vesuvio nightclub was so loud it vibrated in your teeth. It was a place of dark velvet, smoke, and cheap perfume. Marco's old crew, 4 of them, were in a back booth, laughing, drinking Dante's liquor on Dante's territory. The music did not stop when Dante entered, but the laughter did. He moved through the crowd, flanked by 2 of his men, a shadow in a perfectly tailored black suit. He didn't rush. He walked to the booth and, without asking, sat down. "Marco's boys," he said, his voice a low, pleasant murmur that was somehow louder than the bass. The crew leader, a man named Sal, tried to look tough. "Mr. Varelli, an honor." "No, it's not." Dante leaned forward, placing his newly taped hands on the table. "You have a debt with me, and you have been collecting from the wrong person." Sal's smile faltered. "I don't know what you mean." "Aria Moretti," Dante said, the name sounding strange and clean in the dirty air. "Apartment 3B. The spray paint was a nice touch. Unimaginative, but I appreciate the effort." Sal went pale. She was Marco's. "She's mine," Dante said. The words were simple. They were absolute. "Her debt is erased. Your debt, however, has just increased, with interest." He smiled, a thin, cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "I am not going to kill you. Sal, killing is messy, and you are not worth the cleanup." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But if you, or any man you have ever spoken to, goes within 5 blocks of her or her son again, I will personally dismantle your entire life. I will take your car. I will take your apartment. I will take the business your father left you. And then, when you have nothing left, I will take your knees. Do you understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out of the club. Aria found out the next morning. She heard Elena and another housekeeper whispering in the laundry room. "He went to the Vesuvio, dealt with them personally, the Moretti woman." Aria stormed into his study. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian. He saw her, said a final, sharp word, and hung up. "What did you do?" she demanded, her hands clenched into fists. She was shaking, not with fear but with rage. "You had no right. You went after them. This is my life, my mess. You just made it worse. You just linked me to this, to you." He stood from his desk, the massive piece of mahogany separating them. He walked around it, not quickly, not menacingly, but with a deliberate, heavy calm, until he was standing directly in front of her. She was trembling, her breath coming in short, angry gasps. She was furious and she was terrified. He just looked at her, his dark eyes tracing the outrage on her face. He saw her anger. He saw her fear. He saw the trembling in her hands, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. He lifted one hand. She flinched. He stopped, then gently. He tucked a stray piece of dark hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was so light it was barely there. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. His voice was a low, dark promise, a vibration that went straight down her spine and settled deep in her belly. "No one will ever hurt you again." She stopped shaking. Her anger dissolved, replaced by a wave of something far more complicated and terrifying. It was gratitude. It was a sense of safety she hadn't felt in her entire adult life. He was right. He had done what she never could. And in that moment, she knew she was no longer his guest. She was his, and she wasn't sure if she was in a fortress or a cage. That night, his promise, "No one will ever hurt you again," hung in the air between them, a declaration that changed everything and nothing. The fury and fear that had driven Aria to confront him had dissolved, leaving behind an exhausted, complicated silence. She was no longer a guest. She was a resident, living under the protection of a man whose power she was only just beginning to understand. Aria stopped trying to scrub the floors. She stopped trying to earn her keep through menial labor. She saw now that her resistance was a form of pride he found unnecessary, almost insulting. He had not saved her to make her his maid. He had saved her. The reason why remained a dangerous, unspoken question. Instead, she fought for a different kind of normalcy. With Dante's silent approval, she enrolled in 2 online classes at the local community college, one in small business management, the other in art history. They were small, digital windows to a world outside the imposing stone walls of the estate, a way to build a future that was her own, even if she was building it from inside a gilded cage. Her days settled into a new, peaceful routine. She would wake with Noah, have breakfast with him in the bright, sunny kitchen, and see him off to the private school. Then, she would retreat to the vast, quiet library, her laptop open, her mind grappling with accounting principles and the nuances of the Italian Renaissance. One afternoon, Dante found her there, sketching in a notebook, her textbooks forgotten. He had entered so silently. She only noticed him when his shadow fell across her page. "You are drawing the garden," he observed, his voice low. Aria's hand stilled. She hadn't realized she was, "It's quiet out there. It helps me think. My cousin, Sophia, arrives tomorrow," he said, abruptly changing the subject. "She is 16. Her father is no longer with us. She will be living here while she finishes school. Her English is poor." Aria looked up, confused by the non sequitur. "I'm sorry for her loss. She does not need pity," he said, his tone flat. "She needs to pass her exams. You will tutor her." And just like that, she had a new job. Sophia was a shy, sullen girl with the same dark, watchful eyes as her cousin. She treated Aria with suspicion for the first week, answering her questions in monosyllabic Italian. But Aria was patient. She knew what it was like to be powerless and angry at the world. She didn't push. She just sat with her, correcting grammar, reading American poetry aloud, and slowly, a fragile trust was formed. Dante began to join them. He would sit in his study, the door open to the library where Aria and Sophia worked, listening. He never interfered, but his presence was a constant, heavy warmth. The walls between them, so carefully constructed, began to erode. He started waiting for her. When she finished her classes for the day, she would find him on the terrace, 2 cups of coffee waiting. They would take long walks in the garden, a sprawling, immaculate space his mother had designed. Bruno, the massive cane corso, would trail behind them like an obedient shadow. Their conversations were tentative at first. She told him about her classes. He listened, truly listened, asking sharp, insightful questions about her business plan for a hypothetical bookstore. Slowly, the topics deepened. When Noah was asleep and the house was draped in silence, they would share a late dinner. Elena would light the candles in the small, informal dining room and then disappear, leaving them alone in the flickering light. "Why a bookstore?" he asked one night, swirling the dark red wine in his glass. "Because they're quiet," Aria said, toying with her fork. "They're safe. When I was a kid, the library was my only escape. I want to build a place like that for other kids, a place where they can be safe, even for just an hour." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You feel guilty," he stated. "What? About Noah? You feel guilty that he is here, that he is safe because of me?" Aria looked down. "He is safe. But he is a prisoner here, just like I am. He can't have friends over. He's driven to school in a bulletproof car. This isn't a life. Dante, it's just survival. It is all I have ever known," he said, his voice quiet. "This house was my father's. The business was his. I did not choose it. I inherited it. The guilt is a heavy price for a life you never asked for." It was the most he had ever revealed. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the mafia boss, but a man trapped by his own name, obligated by blood to a world he seemed to wear like ill-fitting armor. The air between them crackled. The space was no longer just quiet. It was intimate. The first kiss happened on a Tuesday. It was an emotionally draining day. Sophia, after weeks of resistance, had finally broken down in Aria's arms, weeping for the father she had lost and the life she had been forced to leave behind. Aria had held her, murmuring comforts, her own heart aching with a familiar sense of loss. Dante had come home to find them like that. He had watched from the doorway, his face unreadable, before quietly arranging for Sophia to be taken to her room, a mild sedative procured from Dr. Alessi later. Arya found Dante in the library, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring into the unlit fireplace. "You were good with her," he said, not turning. "She's just a child who lost her father." Arya came to stand beside him. "She's grieving." "We do not grieve in this family," he said, the words cold. "We endure. That's a terrible way to live, Dante." He turned to her then, his eyes dark and intense. The controlled mask he always wore was fractured. He looked tired. He looked raw. "Do you think I do not know that?" He reached out, his hand moving slowly, as if not to startle her. His fingers brushed her cheek, his thumb tracing the soft skin under her eye. You are not like them. You are not like anyone in this world. You feel everything. You are not afraid to be weak." "I am terrified. Every single day," she whispered. "No," he said, his voice rough. "You are brave enough to be terrified. The rest of us are just numb." He leaned in, slowly, deliberately. He was giving her time to pull away, time to say no. She was frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs, caught in the gravity of his gaze. His lips touched hers. It was not a violent kiss. It was not hungry or demanding. It was a kiss of profound, desperate exploration. It was slow, a deliberate claiming, a question and an answer all in one. His other hand came up, cupping her face, his rough palms holding her as if she were made of irreplaceable glass, as if he was scared to ruin this one clean thing in his life. The kiss lingered, soft and deep, and it sent a shockwave through her entire body. Arya pulled back, her breath catching. It was too much. The implications were too vast. She pressed her hands to his chest, her fingers splayed against the hard muscle. "Dante, no." "Why?" he asked, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes still closed. "Don't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do this out of pity. I am not another one of your charity cases. I am not broken." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his dark eyes blazing. His grip on her face tightened, just slightly. "Pity?" he said, the word a low growl. "Arya, I have not felt pity for you once." He leaned in again, his lips brushing hers, a ghost of the kiss. "I have felt admiration. I have felt a hunger I did not think I was capable of. And I have felt something much deeper, something that scares me more than any bullet." He did not kiss her again. He let her go, his hands dropping to his sides. Arya fled, her heart overwhelmed, her lips still tingling from the pressure of his. The next night, the sky broke open. A violent storm rolled in over the city, lashing the estate with wind and horizontal rain. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to shake the thick windows in their frames. Then, the house plunged into darkness. The blackout was total, a suffocating, inky black. Arya sat bolt upright in her bed, her heart leaping into her throat. Noah cried out from his own bed, and she scrambled to him, pulling him into her arms. "It's okay, baby. It's just the storm." The backup generators kicked in, but they were unreliable, flickering. The main hallway was lit by a few eerie emergency lights, casting long, monstrous shadows. The wind howled, a high-pitched, mournful sound that reminded her of the spray-painted thread on her old apartment door. She was in a fortress, but she had never felt more exposed. She was alone, in the dark, and the man who had kissed her, the man who held her life in his hands, was just down the hall. She couldn't stay in the room. The shadows were too deep. The fear was too raw. She picked up a sleeping Noah, his small body a warm, comforting weight, barefoot, her heart pounding. She padded down the dark hallway to Dante's room. His door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. He was there, a dark silhouette against the massive window, watching the storm rage over his city. He was wearing only a pair of black lounge pants, his chest and back bare. He turned as she entered. He wasn't surprised. It felt, in that moment, like he had been waiting for her. "Arya, the storm," she said, her voice small. Noah was scared. It was a lie. She was scared. He understood. He didn't mock her. He just nodded, his eyes soft in the dim, flashing light. He walked to his bed, a massive, imposing piece of furniture, and pulled back the heavy comforter. He can sleep here. He will be safe. Arya gently laid Noah in the center of the vast bed. The boy sighed and burrowed into the pillows, immediately falling back asleep. She turned to leave, to go back to her own cold, empty room. "Stay," he said. It was not a command. It was a plea. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. The wind shrieked, and a branch scraped violently against the glass. She turned back. He was standing in front of her. He didn't move. He just waited. She walked toward him, a moth to a dangerous flame. When she was close enough to touch, she stopped. She was trembling. He lifted a hand, laying it gently on her shoulder. His skin was warm. "You are shaking. I'm afraid," she whispered. But she wasn't talking about the storm. "I know," he said. He slid his hand from her shoulder up to her neck, his thumb caressing the pulse that beat frantically there. "So am I." He kissed her. This kiss was different. It held all the longing from the night before, but now it was tinged with the desperation of the storm. It was a surrender. His other arm circled her waist, pulling her flush against his bare chest. She could feel the heat of his skin, the thud of his heart against hers. She gasped, and his lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, to the sensitive skin behind her ear. "You are safe, Arya," he whispered, his voice a rough vibration against her skin. "I will not hurt you." He undressed her gently, reverently, his hands shaking, a stark contrast to the power she knew they possessed. He kissed her trembling shoulders, his lips a warm, reassuring pressure in the cold room. He kissed the hollow of her throat. He didn't take. He worshipped. He treated her body not as an object of lust, but as a territory he was honored to explore. And Arya, who had only ever known the selfish, bruising touch of her ex-husband, melted. She let go. She trusted him. Her fear dissolved, replaced by a wave of sensation, a deep, aching need that matched his own. She clung to him, her hands exploring the hard plains of his back, her fear of the storm outside replaced by the fire he was building inside. They slept entangled, her back pressed against his chest, his arm heavy and possessive around her waist. Arya woke to the pale, gray light of dawn. The storm had passed. The first thing she registered was the silence. The second was the weight of his arm, holding her as if he was afraid she, too, would disappear by morning. She felt his breath, even and slow, in her hair. She had never felt so safe. The peace lasted for 2 hours. A phone call shattered the morning. Arya was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, her body aching in a new and pleasant way. When Dante came in, his face a mask of cold fury, he was already dressed in a sharp, dark suit. "What is it?" she asked. "An accident," he said, his voice clipped. "A fire. In your old neighborhood." Arya's blood ran cold. "What fire?" "Noah's old school," he said. "It burned to the ground. An accidental fire. They're calling it faulty wiring." He was pacing, his controlled energy from the night before replaced by a predator's restlessness. "It was the Russos, a rival family. They're testing me, trying to flush me out, sending a message." A message? Arya felt sick. By burning down a school for children? "They don't care about the children," he said, his voice flat. "They care about territory. They are reminding me that I am weak, that I have attachments." He looked at her, and his meaning was clear. "Dante," she said, grabbing his arm. He stopped pacing. Please, don't retaliate. This is what I was afraid of. This cycle, this violence. It will never end. Please don't be the man they think you are." He looked at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own, his expression softening for just a moment. "I am not the man you fear. Arya, I am not your ex-husband. I do not rule with blind rage. I will handle this my way." He assured her he would not escalate. He assured her it was just a message, that they were safe inside the estate. He was lying, or at least he was omitting the truth. He was forced to act that very afternoon. Noah came home from his new school, happy, his backpack full of drawings. He ran to Aria, showing her a picture of a large black dog he had labeled Bruno. Aria smiled, her fear from the morning momentarily forgotten. She went to get him his afternoon snack. Opening his backpack to put his drawing on the fridge, a small, folded piece of paper fell out. It wasn't Noah's. It was cheap notebook paper. She opened it. There were only 5 words, written in a crude, blocky script. "We know where he sleeps." She was holding it when Dante walked into the kitchen. He saw her face. The blood drained from it, the way her hand was shaking. He took the note from her. His face went utterly, terrifyingly blank. The ice was back. The promise he had made her, the one he had whispered in her ear after the nightclub, had been violated. They had threatened his house. They had threatened her. They had threatened his son. Because in that moment, looking at the note, then at Aria, then at Noah, happily eating an apple, Dante Varelli knew the boy was his. In every way that mattered, he looked at Aria, and the time for peace, for candlelight dinners and quiet conversations, was over. The note changed everything. The fragile peace, built on shared glances and quiet dinners, shattered. Within an hour, Aria and Noah were in the back of another black car, a different one. This one with windows so thick they distorted the gray landscape rushing past. Dante was not with them. He had stayed behind, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He had only given one order to his driver: keep them safe. Their new home was a villa nestled in the rolling countryside, 2 hours from the city. It was beautiful, all honey-colored stone, sprawling vineyards and wide, empty skies. It was also a fortress. Men with watchful eyes and dark suits patrolled the perimeter. There was only one road in, and it was guarded by a gate that looked strong enough to stop a tank. It was safe. It was suffocating. Aria's isolation was total. Here. There was no city noise. No online classes. The internet was heavily restricted for security reasons. And no illusion of purpose. Elena and the kind house staff were gone, replaced by a new, silent crew who cooked and cleaned with an efficiency that was bordering on invisible. She missed her independence with a physical ache. She missed the grime of her old apartment, the struggle, the feeling that she was fighting for something. Here. She was a protected liability. She was becoming dependent on a violent world she despised, and the man who ran it. Dante visited when he could, but his visits were different now. He was no longer the quiet, watchful man in the library. He was the boss at war. He would arrive late at night, the sound of his car the only thing breaking the crushing silence of the countryside. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper. He brought her gifts, attempts at normalcy that felt almost tragic. Pastries from a city bakery she had once mentioned, rare art books for her to sketch from, a bouquet of flowers so vibrant they looked alien in the sterile environment. But these gestures were tainted by the reality of his life. One evening, he arrived as she was putting Noah to bed. He stood in the doorway, his large frame filling it, and watched her sing a quiet lullaby. When she came out, he tried to smile, but it was a grimace. She stopped in the hallway. "Dante, your hand." He instinctively tried to hide it, but it was too late. His knuckles, the ones he had taped in the gym, were split open, bruised a dark, angry purple. He'd been hitting something again, or someone. "It is nothing," he said, his voice rough. "Is it?" she challenged, her voice low. She stepped closer and gently took his hand. He let her. She touched the raw skin, her touch feather-light. Then her eyes drifted to his cuff. A dark, crimson stain, almost black, was soaking through the pristine white cotton. "Blood!" She recoiled, dropping his hand as if it were on fire. "God, Dante! What did you do?" "What was necessary," he said, his voice cold, his eyes shutting her out. "Necessary," she cried, her voice rising, echoing in the too-perfect hallway. "This isn't necessary. This is a choice. Burning schools, hurting people, threatening children. This is your world." "Do you think I want this?" he roared, his control snapping. He didn't shout often, but when he did, the air crackled. This is the only world. Arya, do you think the Russos play by any other rules? Then leave it, she begged, tears of frustration and fear springing to her eyes. Sell it, burn it down, give it away. I don't care. We can go somewhere else. I can work. You don't have to be this person. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that held no humor. Leave it? Just like that? He raked a hand through his hair. It is not a job. Arya, it is a bloodline. It is a website. My father built it, his father before him. It owns me. It owns every person I have ever known. You cannot just walk away. So you're a prisoner, just like me, she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving only a vast sadness. He stepped toward her, his anger gone, replaced by a deep, weary honesty. He cupped her face, his bruised hands surprisingly gentle. I am in a cage I cannot see, he confessed, his voice breaking. And the first beautiful thing that has ever flown into it is you. And I have trapped you. He closed his eyes. But I am trying, Arya. For the first time in my life, I am trying to find a way out. I just don't know how. The confession hung between them, raw and exposed. The argument was over, the anger spent, leaving only the wreckage. That night, they found a brief, desperate reprieve. The house was silent. Noah was asleep. The guards were invisible shadows outside. He came to her room. He didn't knock. He just entered, as if drawn by a force he could no longer fight. He stood by her bed, a dark shape against the moonlight, and simply watched her. She sat up, the sheet pooling around her waist. Dante! He sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't touch her, not yet. He just looked at her, his eyes filled with a desperate, hungry longing that mirrored her own. They were two people clinging to a ledge, and the only solid thing in the world was each other. I am sorry, he whispered, for the blood, for the cage, for all of it. I know, she whispered back. Me too. She reached out, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. It wasn't a night of soft romance. It was a collision. It was desperate, slow, and intense. A silent conversation of apology and fear. He kissed her with a possessive, almost frantic energy, as if the Russos were at the door and this was their last moment. His hands mapped her body, memorizing her, claiming her, while his lips whispered apologies against her skin. And she held him. She met his desperation with her own, her hands gripping his shoulders, her body arching to meet his. It was a fierce, raw coming together, a way of blotting out the violence and the fear, a way of proving, just for a few hours, that they were alive and that this one true thing was real. They fell asleep tangled in the sheets, their bodies slick with sweat, the sound of their ragged breathing the only sound in the quiet villa. The reprieve was short-lived, while they were lost in each other. Dante's second-in-command, a man named Luca, was back at the main estate, sitting in a dark security van. Luca was not a soldier. He was a wraith, a man who dealt in data, whispers, and technology. He was Dante's eyes and ears. He was reviewing the security footage from Noah's new private school. He watched the boy play. He watched the teacher. He watched the other children. Then he saw it. A man, dressed as a janitor, had accidentally spilled a bucket of water near Noah. He apologized, helped Noah gather his things, and handed him his teddy bear, the old, worn bear he'd had since he was a baby, the one Arya had grabbed on her way out of their old apartment. Luca's blood ran cold. He rewound the footage, zooming in, the janitor's hand holding the bear, a flicker of metal, a small, dark disc, no bigger than a button, slipped deftly into the seam on the bear's back. Luca made a call. Sir, we have a problem. They are inside. A flashback, a memory from a life Arya had tried to bury. Marco, her ex-husband, coming home late, smelling of fear and cheap whiskey. He was frantic, hiding a small, leather-bound book in the crawlspace under their sink. If anyone asks, you saw nothing, you hear me? Nothing, he had hissed, his eyes wide and terrified. He had vanished 2 days later, leaving her with his debts and his name. He wasn't just a thug. He was a courier for the Russo cartel. And the book he had hidden was their port ledger, a detailed record of every bribe, every shipment, every crooked cop on their payroll. The Russos, paranoid and furious, had torn his life apart looking for it, and when they couldn't find it, they turned to the only person left, his wife. They didn't believe she didn't know. They thought her ignorance was a lie. The fire, the note they were just turning the screws, trying to flush her out, to make her run to the very ledger they so desperately wanted. Dante returned to the villa in the harsh light of midday. Aria was in the garden with Noah, trying to teach him the names of the flowers. She saw Dante's face as he got out of the car, and she knew. The man from last night, the desperate, vulnerable lover, was gone. The boss was back. "Noah," he said, his voice flat, "go inside with Maria." The housekeeper appeared instantly, taking a protesting Noah by the hand. Aria stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands onto her jeans. "Dante, what is it? You're scaring me." He didn't speak. He walked past her, into the house, into Noah's room. He reappeared a moment later, holding the teddy bear by one ear. "This," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "His bear? What about it?" He pulled a small, dark disc from his pocket and held it up. Luca found it, a camera, and a microphone. "It has been broadcasting everything from this house for the last 24 hours. Every conversation, everything." Aria's hand flew to her mouth. The blood drained from her face. Last night, their argument, their reprieve, they had been watched, listened to. But how? "Your ex-husband," he said. "Marco. He worked for the Russos. He stole something from them, a ledger. They think he gave it to you." He confronted her, his eyes not accusatory but cold with a desperate, terrifying need for the truth. "What did he tell you? Aria? What did you see, think? Any safe deposit box? Any storage unit? Any names he mentioned?" She stared at him. The horror of the violation, the camera in her son's toy, making her sick. She felt exposed, violated, used. "Nothing," she whispered, shaking her head, the tears coming fast now. "He never told me anything. He was a monster. He didn't trust me. He hit me. He told me nothing." She saw the memory then, the crawl space, the book. "He hid something. Once? Under the sink, a book, a little black book. But I left it. I ran. I never looked back. I swear, Dante, I didn't know, I swear." He saw the raw, honest terror in her eyes. He saw the truth. He believed her. He closed his eyes, his fist clenching, the small, dark disc crushing in his grip. The tension wasn't from his suspicion of her. It was from the terrible, undeniable fact that she was the key, and she didn't even know it. Aria's horror turned to a sickening, crushing guilt. It was her past, her ex-husband, her mess. She had brought this war to his doorstep. She was the weakness the Russos were exploiting. She was going to get him killed. She was going to get Noah killed. "It's me," she choked out, backing away from him. "It's all my fault. I brought this to you. I'm the one they want." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a terrible, final resolve. "I have to leave. I'll take Noah. I'll disappear. For real this time. If I'm gone, they'll stop coming for you. It's the only way. You have to let me go." Dante stood frozen for a beat. The thought of her leaving, of her being right, of her walking out into a world where he couldn't protect her, coalesced into a singular, blinding rage. It wasn't directed at her. It was directed at the Russos, at his father, at the entire world that was trying to take her from him. "No." The word was a low growl. He took a step toward her. She took a step back. "Dante, you have to—" "No!" He roared, and he slammed his fist into the pristine plaster wall beside her head. The wall cracked, a spiderweb of fractures emanating from the impact. Aria cried out, flinching. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, his enraged, heartbroken eyes locked on hers. He was trapped, he was furious, and he had made his choice. "I choose you," he shouted, his voice echoing through the silent, perfect villa. "Do you understand me? I choose you, even if it ends me." His words, "I choose you," were not an outburst, they were a sentence. They hung in the air of the villa for days, changing the very quality of the light. The decision had been made. The defensive, Restless energy that had plagued Dante for weeks hardened into something cold, sharp, and focused. He was no longer a man reacting to a threat. He was a hunter setting a trap. He did not go to the city. He summoned his second-in-command, Luca, to the countryside. They met in a soundproof study, a room built for secrets, while Arya and Noah were asleep. "They believe she has the ledger," Dante said, his voice flat. He was staring at a map of his own property. "They have proven they are willing to burn down a school and threaten a child to get it. They are desperate, and desperate men are predictable." Luca, a thin, pale man who looked more like an accountant than a capo, nodded. "They are also sloppy. The bug in the bear was amateur. They think we found it," Dante continued. "They expect us to hide. They expect me to move her. Instead, we will feed them what they want to hear." The trap was simple. Dante had a man in his own organization, a low-level earner, who had been feeding information to the Russo family for months. Dante had known about him for almost a year, keeping him active as a useful channel for misinformation. "You will have a conversation," Dante instructed Luca. "You will let our friend overhear you. You will sound angry. You will say that Miss Moretti is getting reckless, that she is planning to leave the country, that she has the ledger with her at the villa, and that she intends to use it as insurance against me. You are painting a target on her back." "Boss," Luca said, his face impassive. "I am painting a target on the house." Dante corrected him. "I will be here when they come. You will tell our friend that I will be in the city for the next 2 days. Finalizing a new shipping contract, the house will be lightly guarded." "They will come," Luca affirmed. "I know," Dante said, his eyes dark, "and they will not leave." While Dante sharpened his knives, Arya tried to find peace. She felt the shift in him, the man who had confessed his fears, the lover who had whispered apologies in the dark, was gone. In his place was the boss, a man of chilling stillness and absolute purpose. He was polite, almost distant, but his eyes followed her with a possessive, protective intensity that left her breathless. She knew what she had brought to his door. She knew the cost of his choice. She took Noah into the small, walled garden at the back of the villa. The earth was damp and cold, but she had found a bag of potting soil and some seeds in a shed. She needed to plant something. She needed to feel life, to put roots into this poisoned soil. "We're planting herbs, baby," she murmured, guiding Noah's small hands as he patted dirt over a seed. "This one is rosemary. It's for remembering." "Remembering what, Mama?" "Everything," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "Just everything." She began to sketch again. It was a lifeline. She filled a notebook with the contours of the vineyard, the heavy clouds, the sharp, intelligent eyes of Bruno the dog, but mostly, she drew Dante. She sketched his hands from memory, the long, capable fingers, the bruised knuckles, the way they had held her face as if she were porcelain. That night, while the house slept and Dante was supposedly in the city, she wrote him a letter. Her hand, steady from hours of drawing, flowed across the page. She did not write of her fear. She did not beg him to stop. She wrote the truth. She told him that she had been running her entire life, first from poverty, then from a man who hated her. She had been so focused on surviving that she had forgotten how to live. She wrote that he was the first person who had ever truly seen her, not as a victim, but as a person. He had shown her a safety she never knew existed, even in the heart of a war. She sealed the letter, her hand trembling only slightly. "I know what this world will do to us," she finished, "but I am not afraid of it anymore. And I am not afraid of you. I love you, even if it destroys us." She tucked the letter into the drawer of the nightstand beside her bed. It was a final testament, a single, clean truth in a world of lies and violence. The attack came 2 days later, just after noon. The sky was a high, bright blue. Dante had left for the city 6 hours prior, his departure staged and visible from the main road. The villa was quiet. Arya was cleaning up from lunch. Noah was in the living room, building a tower of blocks. The silence of the house was what warned her. It was too complete, The normal sounds, the patrolman's boots on the gravel, the hum of the security system were gone. Then, the power died. Not a flicker or a brownout, a sudden dead stop. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. The lights went out. The backup generators, which should have kicked in within 3 seconds, remained silent. Aria's blood turned to ice. "Noah," she said, her voice sharp, calm. "Come to Mama. Now, we're going to play a game. The quiet game." He ran to her. She didn't run to the phone. She knew it would be dead. She grabbed his hand and pulled him into the kitchen, toward the pantry. It was a deep walk-in space. She pushed him inside, behind the sacks of flour and pasta. "You do not make a sound," she commanded, her fingers gripping his shoulders. "You do not move. Not for anything. It is a very important game. Noah, you do not come out until I come and get you, or until Dante comes. Do you understand me? Only me or Dante." His eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. She kissed his forehead. "I love you more than anything." She closed the heavy wooden door, plunging him into darkness. She turned, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was alone. She grabbed the heaviest, longest knife from the butcher block. Her hand wrapped tight around the handle. She backed against the wall, next to the doorway, and she waited. She didn't wait long. She heard the sound of shattering glass from the living room, the French doors. She heard heavy footsteps. More than one person. They were not trying to be quiet. They thought the house was empty, save for her. "Find her!" a rough voice barked. "Russo wants the ledger. She knows where it is. Find the woman." A man in a black ski mask appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was holding a gun. He didn't see her at first. He was looking toward the pantry. Aria did not think. She screamed, a raw, primal sound, and lunged. She was not a warrior, but she was a mother. She plunged the knife forward, fueled by pure adrenaline. She felt the blade sink into the thick muscle of his shoulder. He bellowed in pain, striking her, not a punch, but a backhand, his gun hand connecting with her face. The world exploded in a flash of white, agonizing light. She crumpled to the limestone floor, the knife clattering beside her, her vision swimming. The man clutched his bleeding arm, cursing, and kicked her hard in the ribs. "Grab her," he spat at another man who ran in. "We'll take her to the cellar. She'll talk." They dragged her, her senses reeling, her lips split and bleeding, her fight gone. What they did not know was that Dante had never left. He was 500 yards away, hidden in the dense tree line, watching his home through a pair of high-powered binoculars. He was sitting in a hardened surveillance van with Luca and 4 of his best men. He saw the perimeter guards, his own men, taken out by silenced rifles. He saw the power cut. He saw them breach the glass doors. He waited. He counted. 4 men. "They are all inside," Luca said, his hand on his weapon. Dante's face was carved from granite. He was not angry. He was something colder, something final. "Now," he said. The attack on his home was brutal, but his response was surgical. He and his men moved through the woods, entering the house not through the broken doors, but through the reinforced steel service entrance in the basement. They moved up through the house they knew intimately. The fight was cinematic in its terrible efficiency. It was a series of muffled sounds, sharp cracks from silenced weapons, the thud of bodies falling on expensive rugs. The Russo men were thugs, sent to grab a defenseless woman. Professionals met them. Dante took down 2 men in the foyer himself. He saw the third, the one with the bleeding arm. By the kitchen, he was running, trying to get back to his partners. Dante did not shoot him. He moved like a shadow, disarming him and breaking his wrist in one fluid, horrific motion. The man crumpled. Dante stepped over him and went straight to the pantry. He ripped the door open. Noah was huddled in the dark, his hands over his ears, tears streaming down his face, but utterly silent. He saw Dante, and his small body became limp with relief. Dante scooped him up in one arm, his hand covering the boy's head, shielding his eyes. "Luca," he snapped. Luca appeared, his weapon down. "Get him to the car. Lock it down. Do not move until I come." Luca took the boy and disappeared. Dante was alone in the quiet, ruined kitchen. He saw the blood. He saw the knife, and he knew. He heard a sound from below, the wine cellar. He descended the stone steps, his weapon raised. The last man was there. He was trying to tie Arya to a heavy oak chair. He heard Dante on the stairs and turned. Raising his weapon, Dante was faster. 2 shots, precise and final. The man dropped. The cellar was cold and silent, save for Arya's ragged, terrified breaths. She was on the floor, her hands partially bound, her lip was split, a thin line of blood trickling down her chin. Bruises were already blooming on her cheek and arms from where they had dragged her, but her eyes were alive, blazing with terror and a defiant, furious light. He holstered his weapon and went to her, dropping to his knees. The silence was fragile, broken only by the drip of a nearby wine cask. He pulled a small knife from his boot and sliced through the plastic ties on her wrists. "Noah!" she gasped, her voice raw. He is safe," Dante said, his voice thick. "He's in the car. He's fine. He was quiet. He was so brave." Arya sagged, the last of her adrenaline leaving her. She looked at the man Dante had shot, then back at Dante. Her body was shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. "They wanted the ledger," she whispered, her fingers touching her bleeding mouth. "He said he would go back for Noah if I didn't talk." She met his eyes, and the tears finally came. "I didn't beg for my life. Dante, I didn't. I told them to go to hell." She choked on a sob. "I begged for yours. I told them you would come and that you would kill them all. I begged them to run." That broke him. The cold precision, the controlled fury, the mask of the boss, it all shattered. He put his forehead against hers, his eyes closing, his entire body shuddering. He grabbed her hand, the one that was scraped and dirty, and he kissed it, pressing his lips to her skin, tasting her blood. He pulled back, his dark eyes burning into hers. All pretense gone. "I am done pretending." "Arya," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion he could no longer name. "This is not protection. This is not some debt. I love you." He kissed her other hand, holding it to his cheek. "They tried to take you from me. I will burn down the world for you, I swear it." The man Arya had stabbed in the kitchen was still alive. They dragged him to the garage, tying him to a steel support pillar. Dante was no longer the controlled soldier. His fury was back, a white-hot, silent rage. Arya followed him, wrapped in a blanket, refusing to be left behind. "Who sent you?" Dante's voice was low, terrifying. "Who gave the order?" The man spat a bloody curse at him. "Russo. Go to hell." "Russo is a name," Dante said. "I want the name." He looked at the man's broken wrist, then at his other hand. He nodded to Luca. Luca stepped forward. Arya turned her head, but she heard the sickening, dull snap, followed by a raw, animal scream that echoed in the concrete garage. "Stop!" the man shrieked, sobbing. "Stop! It was Gio Russo." Dante still... "The brother?" "Yes, the boss's younger brother. He wanted the ledger to make his own move to prove he could take over." "It was Gio. It was all Gio." Dante's face was ice. He had his target. He pulled out his weapon, the rage in his eyes promising a swift, brutal end. He was going to end this, once and for all. "Dante," Arya's voice cut through his fury. He stopped, his back to her. "Please," she whispered. He could hear her shaking. "You won. You have the name." She stepped closer. "Do not kill him, not like this, not unless you must. Please do not become them." He stood frozen for a long moment, the gun heavy in his hand. He was at war with Gio Russo, with his own world, and now with the woman he loved. He lowered the gun. He looked at Luca. "Clean this up. Send Gio a message. Tell him I have his man, and I am coming for him." He turned and walked to Arya, pulling her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in, trying to block out the scent of blood and fear with the one clean thing he had left. Arya's plea in the garage, "Do not become them," had been a tether. It had not stopped Dante's rage, but it had channeled it. He had let the man live, a decision that felt foreign and heavy. He had not done it for the man. He had done it for her. The next 48 hours were a blur of cold, calculated preparation. Arya and Noah were moved again, this time to a penthouse in the city, under the watch of 3 of his most trusted men. Dante, however, did not rest. He used the captured attacker's phone. He sent a simple, untraceable text to Gio Russo. "I have your man." He told me everything. "I also have the ledger. Your brother will be very interested. He proposed a meeting, not in his territory, not in theirs, a neutral site, an abandoned freight yard on the industrial side of the river, midnight. He told Gio to come alone. He knew he would not. Dante did not go alone either. His men were ghosts in the rusted scaffolding. Shadows among the derelict train cars. Gio Russo arrived in a gleaming black SUV, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He was younger than Dante, with a weak chin and the arrogant, restless eyes of a man who had never earned anything in his life. "Varelli," Gio called, his voice trying for bravado and failing. "You have something of mine." Dante stepped out from the shadow of a crane, wearing a dark suit, no overcoat despite the biting cold. "You have it backward, Gio. You tried to take something of mine." "She's a whore," Gio spat. "Marco's trash. She has my family's ledger. Give it to me, and we can forget this whole mess." "Your father and mine had an understanding." "My father is dead," Dante said, his voice quiet, carrying on the wind. "And you, Gio, are a fool. You didn't come for a ledger. You came for a throne. You were going to use that book to blackmail your own brother." Gio's face paled. "Lies. I have nothing to. Save it." Dante held up a small, digital audio recorder. "You see, you are sloppy. Your men are sloppy. You believe in threats and muscle. I believe in information. When your men broke into my house, they were chatty. One of them was stupid enough to have an open line on his phone, to call his boss for instructions when the woman they were sent to grab wouldn't talk." Dante pressed a button. The air filled with the sound of Aria's muffled sob, the crash of a chair, and then a man's voice. "Boss, she's not talking. She's tougher than she looks." And then Gio's voice, tinny and sharp. "Then make her talk. I don't care how you do it. I need that ledger. You understand? My brother thinks I'm a joke. This is my only move." The recording clicked off. Gio was frozen. His mask of arrogance shattered, replaced by the stark, white terror of a boy who had been caught. "You are a traitor to your own blood," Dante said, his voice laced with contempt. "You set a fire at a children's school. You sent animals to terrorize a mother and her child. You did not do it for your family. You did it for yourself." Dante tossed the recorder to Luca, who emerged from the shadows. "That recording has 2 copies, Dante said. "One is for your brother. I'm sure he will be fascinated to learn of your ambition. The other is for the authorities. The part where you order a man to assault a civilian should be enough to put you away for a very long time." Gio was shaking, his eyes darting to his bodyguards, who were now pointedly looking at Dante's men, who had materialized on the rooftops, rifles glinting in the moonlight. "What do you want?" Gio whispered. "Aria Moretti," Dante said. "Her name is erased from your systems, from your memory. Marco's debt is gone. Her connection to your family is severed. You will sign over a controlling interest in the portside shipping company your father used to launder his money. It will be compensation for the damage to my home. And for her—" "You can't," Gio stammered. That's my entire inheritance. It is my price," Dante said. "You give me the company. You erase her name. And in return, I do not send this recording to your brother. He will never know you betrayed him. And I will not send it to the police. You will be left with nothing but your life. It was a public humiliation. It was a financial execution. It was worse than a bullet." Gio, seeing his entire future evaporate, seeing the humiliation he would face, snapped. He was not a man of intelligence. He was an animal of impulse. He screamed, a high, thin sound of pure rage, and lunged. He didn't pull a gun. He pulled a small, silver knife from his boot, aiming for Dante's gut. Dante didn't flinch. He moved, not like a brawler, but like a dancer, turning Gio's momentum against him. He caught Gio's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack. The knife clattered to the pavement. Gio howled, clutching his broken hand, but his momentum carried him forward. Dante stepped to the side, but the wild, desperate lunge had been too fast. The tip of the blade, before it was dropped, had managed to slash across Dante's side, tearing through his suit and shirt. Dante didn't look down. He simply hit Gio once, a hard, precise chop to the side of the neck. Gio collapsed, unconscious, humiliated, and powerless. Dante stood, breathing hard, the adrenaline fading. He looked at his men. Clean this up. Get the paperwork from his car. Take him home. Leave him on his brother's doorstep. A gift. He turned and walked back to his own car, his side beginning to burn. He was exhausted. He was wounded, but he was alive, and he was, for the first time, almost free. He returned to the penthouse as the sun was turning the sky a dirty shade of gray. He was pale, his suit jacket discarded, his white shirt stained crimson along his left side. He had a deep, 8-inch gash just above his hip. Doctor. Alessi had already been summoned, stitching him up with practiced, silent efficiency. Aria was waiting. She'd not slept. She was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. When he walked in, she saw the blood. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the deep, profound weariness of a man who had been to war and back. He stopped, seeing her. He had no words. He had just burned down a part of his world for her. She ran to him. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She threw her arms around his neck, careful of his side, and she kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or of desperation. It was a kiss of full, unconditional surrender. It was a kiss that said, "You are home." It was a kiss that said, "I am yours." She held his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the tired lines around his eyes, and she kissed him again, a long, deep, healing kiss that was a promise of a life he had never thought possible. "It's done," he whispered against her lips. "I know," she whispered back, holding him tightly. "Come here. Let me take care of you." Months passed. The city thawed, and so did their lives. Dante, true to his word, had used the leveraged shipping company as a foundation to begin the slow, agonizingly complex process of becoming legitimate. He sold off the darker, bloodier parts of his empire, absorbing the losses, taking the hits, using his cunning not to rule the underworld, but to escape it. It was a war of a different kind, fought in boardrooms and with lawyers, but it was a war he was winning. Aria found a small, sunlit storefront on a quiet, tree-lined street. With Dante's help, alone, this time with a real interest rate and paperwork she insisted on signing, she opened Noah's Nook. It was a small children's bookstore, painted in bright, cheerful colors. It smelled of new paper, floor polish, and the faint, sweet scent of the cookies she baked in a small oven in the back. She had story time every afternoon at 3. She was happy. It was a simple, profound happiness that felt more real than any safety she had ever known. Noah was thriving. He was no longer the pale, quiet boy from the alley. He was loud. He was bright. He ran. He played. He made friends. He was, finally, just a boy. Dante was a constant, quiet presence. He would show up at the store at closing time, not in a suit, but in jeans and a dark sweater, his sleeves rolled up. He would help her shelve books, his large, scarred hands looking impossibly gentle as they handled the picture books. He would sit in one of the tiny, child-sized chairs, his knees up by his ears, and listen with a grave, secret smile as Noah read a story aloud to him. One evening, in the late autumn, Aria told him she wanted to go somewhere. She drove, taking his car, back to the old, decaying part of the city she had once called home. She parked near a desolate, muddy riverbank, a place where the city's concrete skeleton met the water. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice wary. He was a man who still hated being exposed. "This is where I used to come," she said, getting out of the car. The air was cold, smelling of wet leaves and the river. She walked to the water's edge. He followed, his hand in his pocket, watchful. "When Marco was when he was bad," she said, her voice quiet. "And I had no money, and Noah was sick, and I didn't know how I was going to survive. The next day I would come here. I would sit on that rock," she pointed, "and I would cry. I would look at this ugly, dirty water and just pray for it all to end." She turned to him, the man who had pulled her from an alley, who had killed for her, who now read to her son. "I was so alone. Dante, I was so cold. I remember one night I was here, and I had nothing. I had just given up. I prayed for mercy, just any kind, an end to the pain." She stepped closer, placing her cold hand on his chest, over his heart. "And then, a week later, I collapsed, and you found me. You were the one. You were the mercy." Dante looked at her, his dark eyes filled with an emotion so deep it was painful to see. He had been called many things in his life: boss, killer, monster, son, but never that. He took her hand, the one on his chest, and held it. Then, slowly, he went down on one knee, in the mud, on the bank of that dirty river. He did not have a ring. He did not have a speech. He just knelt before her, holding her hand to his heart. "Aria," he said, his voice thick, raw. "I was a ghost. I was a man living in my father's tomb. I was nothing. You were the one who was alive." He pressed her hand harder against his chest. "You saved me, too." He looked up at her, the most powerful man in the city, kneeling in the dirt. "Marry me, Aria. Be my life, not my weakness, my life." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." The story ended with their wedding. It was not in a grand cathedral. It was in the small garden behind the bookstore, the one she and Noah had planted. It was a sunny afternoon, the air crisp with the promise of a new season. Aria wore a simple, flowing white dress, her dark hair down, flowers woven into it. She was radiant. Dante stood, watching her walk toward him. For the first time in his life, his face was completely, unguardedly open. He was not a boss. He was just a man. In love. Noah, wearing a small, serious suit, held their rings on a silk pillow. He handed them over with a solemnity that made Aria laugh through her tears. They said their vows, simple words they had written themselves, promises not of forever, but of every day. When the judge pronounced them married, Dante drew her close. He did not kiss her immediately. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his voice a low, warm promise meant only for her. "No debts, Aria," he whispered. "Only love." Thank you so much for listening to our story. Single mother collapsed in the street. Mafia boss held her as she whispered. Please have mercy. We hope it keeps you on the edge of your seat. We would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment and say hello. Your thoughts mean the world to us. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more tales of love, danger, and redemption, and do not forget to share your thoughts on Aria and Dante's journey in the comments below.